Welcome to chapter 37. In this chapter, among other things, we are going to have a systematic look at conversion. But before we get to that, we have some other minor grammatical points. The first one is the nominalization of genitive forms. This is to say that genitive forms like myen, my, like my house, myen pratem or so, can be nominalized and used as nouns, meaning mine, basically. And if you do that, if you use this myen to mean mine and use it as a noun, you can inflect it again and give it like an accusative ending, which is why it is perfectly fine in order to see things like, what do you think? Would they publish my article in this journal? And they say, if they published mine, myenum savaktenetgin. So me, I, in genitive, accusative. So this at the first glance, it looks like, oh God, what is this? Two case suffixes on one end, on one stem. Is that even allowed? Well, the thing is that the first case suffix is, in this case, through conversion, become inert, so to say. It's just part of this new nominal stem, myen. So it pretty systematically works, but it is especially commonly used in combination with personal pronouns like myen, mine, tyen, yours, but also memnan vlak, ours. If you know Russian, this would be like nashi, which could be like, if you're lucky, it's just in reference to a sports team, and that can also be inflected by case and whatnot. So indefinite pronouns, adverbs with gnat, another adfix that we have to create indefinite forms. And this time it is a suffix, a post forms. And you can attach to any question word, be it pronominal or adverbal or whatever, like que, who, que gnat, someone, kuse, how, kuse gnat, somehow. This one is set apart from other indefinite forms that we have seen in that it expresses an inevitability, not to be confused with kerek and ketch, where we expressed an indifference that we don't care. Here we are more expressing that it is like, it is foreordained. It is there is going to be somebody, something, somewhere or so where something applies. Like in the second example, you can't find any work here. That can't be. There has to be some kind of work. Not some kind of work. There has to be there. So like the difference in English, you might just put more emphasis on some when you are translating the gnat forms. Good. Conversion. Conversion is if you take a stem from one part of speech and use it in another part of speech without any overt marking. So it also could be called zero derivation in other sources. So nominal conversion. Here, like the creation of nouns. Here I'm first showing how we have derived forms that are through very pretty productive means become nouns. So these purposive adjectives formed from nominal stems, like ner is a noun, nerlik is an adjective, something for the nose, shincha or the snout, shincha is eye, shinchalik would be an adjective for something for the eye, shu is neck, shuyash would be something for the neck, and via conversion these can become nouns, meaning muzzle, glasses, necklace, like objects that are intended for that thing. Very common category of conversion is participles that are usually adjectively used verbal forms to nouns. Then we have tunemshe, and its basic meaning it meant learning, but it can also be a pupil, tunuktushor, and its basic meaning teaching, but it can also mean teacher. And here we have like the a productive source for agent nouns. Parliament, known, but it can also be an acquaintance. Yaratme, loved, but it can also be a darling, a loved one. Kolashash, dying, but it can also be the dying, like Kolashash vlak, if you're saying to Caesar, the I can't remember what it is in English, but those destined to die greet you. And during the Todgeweihten. Okay, Kayashash, having to go, but it can also be those that must go, like Kayashash vlak, those that have to go collect in front of the bus or something like that. Lütteme, fearless, can also be a daredevil, someone who has no fear. Ujtemo, unseeing blind, can also be a blind person. So all of the participles can, by conversion, also be used as nouns. Adjectival, we can take any noun and use it as an adjective. Q, stone, Q, pert, stone, house. Where exactly then the borderline is between this and composition, please don't ask me. Verbal derivation, denominal and adjective, using nouns and adjectives as verbs. Well, I wouldn't say that this is not productive enough that you have to actively learn it, but these are some very practical examples. If we have mushkendo, fist, mushkindash is to hit somebody with a fist. Pujar, a plane, like this kind of tool. Pujarash is to plane. Push, bellows, pushash is to fan with bellows. This kind of thing with which you would fan a fire. So tushto, riddle, tushtash, to set riddles, etc. Peche, fence, pitchash, to fence in. Lum, snow, lumash, to snow, yur, rain, yurash, to rain. So in the long form of this lesson, I look at some semantic differences between these different categories. Not going to go into detail here. One thing I would note that generally the verbal stem and the nominal stem are exactly the same, but not always, because if we have, like, for example, pujar and then pujarash, a second conjugation verb, the verbal stem here would actually be pujare. So it's not exactly the same as the nominal stem. Remember that verbs of the first conjugation generally have they have verbal stems ending generally in a consonant, whereas verbal stems in the second conjugation generally end in e or ö. So in some cases, the conjugation class of the verb is it's mostly predictable, like peche, verbal stem peche, that's a second conjugation verbal stem. So here we have a second conjugation verb. Lum, verbal stem lum. Lum is a first conjugation stem, so we have lumash first conjugation. Same with yur, but kangashash, for example, is an exception. Oshkala, no, kangashash, poshash, pujarash are three exceptions that we have here, and you just have to learn those as exceptions. Verbal derivation, verb to verb. This is well, I'm not even sure if we should strictly be calling this derivation, but this is just as a reminder, when we have these verbs that have the same infinitive, but belong to different conjugation classes, where then the verb of the first conjugation generally is something intransitive, and the verb of the second conjugation is generally something transitive, like kodash kodam, to stay somewhere, to remain somewhere, kodash kodem, to leave something somewhere. It's the same difference, like if you know Finnish, like yada and yetta. Nöltash nöltam, to rise, to go up. Nöltash nöltem, to raise, to bring something up. Temash temam, to fill up. Temash temem, to fill something up. And the distinction, it's not always this meaning. Sometimes it's also like shinchash shincham is to sit down, shinchash shinchem is to sit, where then the shinchash shincham is a transformative one and the shinchash shinchem one is a static one. Be careful with the derivational suffixes alt, where we had a derivational suffix alt of forming first conjugation verbs and alt forming second conjugation verbs. The first one completely productive, the second one highly productive. We'll have a lot of derived forms where we have like vashtaltash, vashtaltam to be changed, vashtaltash, vashtaltem to change momentarily, or sharnash is to remember, sharnaltash is to be remembered, sharnaltash is sorry, this is wrong. It's like to remember, but like for a moment or so. I'm going to fix that in the slides, hopefully. Yeah, so just keep in mind the difference between these conjugation classes when you see any derived form using alt. Depending on which conjugation class it is in, it's either going to be reflexive, etc., or momentary. Next grammatical point, the adverbial suffix a, stressed, meaning used, this is attached to numbers to denote some splitting something into so many parts. And it is like the lower the numeral, the more likely you are to attach it to it. If we have coquet, two, coquette into 2 parts, kumet, kumete into 3 parts, etc. Up to 7 it goes. Shimete is, but I mean, the higher the number, the less likely it is to be used. For 8 kandashe and 9 indeshe, it's not really used. It is, however, used for pele, half. Pele is in half. Note the shift in the stress and how this denotes a change in meaning. Pele is a noun meaning half. Pele is an adverb meaning into half, into. here we have some usage examples, word and word usage. What have we got? Auxiliary constructions. We have a few more. Puash, to give. Puash is generally it is a benefactive marker. A benefactive is when you have a beneficiary of an action who's not the object of the action. Like if I say that I baked my squirrel a cake, that's a benefactive construction. And in Mari, you would bake and give the squirrel a cake. It can also be, in some cases, however, more momentary than, and where like it's not entirely clear if a benefactive aspect is meaningful. So it ties into this too. Nalash, to take, is used as an auto-benefactive marker. Auto-benefactive is like benefactive, just that the person benefiting from the action that isn't the object is the subject itself. For example, I baked myself a cake. Yeah, and in some cases it also goes more like yeah. So for example, it's like having yourself a rest, getting to know something for one's own benefit or so. Sometimes it is also more going in the direction of momentary than auto-benefactive, but auto-benefactive is probably the most important one to know. Ilash, to live. This one is used to indicate that one does something repeatedly over a long period of time, like you spend all your life baking cakes. Or Simon and his wife are waiting for their grandchildren to visit them. They're spending a whole lot of time just waiting and waiting and waiting. Because if you're lucky, well, generally for most people, living is the most long-lasting activities they do in their life. So yeah, it's pretty much the non plus ultra for marking long processes. Next point, uke, there is not, and ogel, he, she, it is not as nominals. Both of these verbs can be used in nominal inflection. They can get nominal suffixes. That, for example, uke, if we use it for ukelan kara, like, sorry, pasha uke is there is no work, and pasha ukelan kara is due to the not being of work, because there is no work. You can also with ogel, and especially you could say Skolish kayash ogalan, blah, 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 in order not to go to school. So Skolish kayash, go to school, Skolish kayash ogel, not to go to school. Ogel was a constituent negator that you can, where you can negate basically miscellaneous parts of speech with it, like for example, the infinitive, and then lan, in order not to go to school or so. Verch, for the sake of, because of. Here it is important to note that this postposition, verch, can be used in combination with both the nominative and the dative. Nachar igeche verch, because of the bad weather, nachar igeche lan verch. Or oxa verch, oxalan verch, both are possible. It can also be used in combination with the future necessitive participle, like shash, the shash form. Stop the shash in order to do well in an exam. There is some restriction here though. If you use shash, so verch, it can be both final, the purpose for something, and causal, the reason of something, because of this or in order to do this. It's like the difference, the dividing line in many languages is weakest, but like in English, I stayed home. Why did you stay home? Because I was sick. Why did you go to work? To finish this task. We use the same question word with why in both of these, but these are very different things, because the reason why it happened, looking back, and in the second example, why do you go to work? It's forward-looking. The reason, the purpose for something, what you were forward-looking thinking to do. So if you use the future necessitive participle, you obligatorily are going for the final meaning, like you're looking forward. You're looking at the reason, as the term future necessitive kind of implies. But here we have the restriction that this is not used in combination with the dative. Here we just use it in the nominative. Fairly trivial note that we've got shomak, mut, both of these words mean word, and the distribution between them seems to be more dialectal than anything else. So they're, for all your intents and purposes, you can consider them synonymous. Oops. Kolash, to hear. We just want to make sure that you don't get this verb kolash kolam, to hear, confused with kolash kolem, which means to die. This is something that is fairly, since the reconstructed Proto-Uralic stems for hearing and dying and also fish were fairly similar in many Uralic languages, hearing, dying, and fish are fairly similar, as is the case in Mari, but they're not completely the same. Choice of conjugation class makes the difference between hearing and dying. Then we're having a look at gun, which we first met meaning if, using conditional clauses. That's the first thing that we saw. But it can also mean as, for, regarding, concerning, as far as I'm concerned. Prototypical example of this would be like you're in a restaurant and your friend says, I'm going to order, you're in Bavaria, you're in a restaurant and your friend orders a beer, not knowing that if you're in the wrong place in Bavaria, order a beer, they bring you a liter mug of beer. And your friend wants to say, well, if it was for me, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not going to do that because blah, blah, blah. Then you could say, or so, like, as for me, as far as I'm concerned, yeah. So that's, of course, it's not then conditional, that's something else. It can be emphatic, interrogative, contrastive, where we have a hard time putting our finger on it. Mo lieshkin, just what will happen. Tachitoleshkin, oh, will she come today? It's, yeah. I know that emphatic particle is an obnoxious category because you can put anything you want in there, but yeah, that's the way it is. Uke plus liash. Another point that we have is that we have in the, we can use uke. There is not in combination with positive forms of liash to denote that something was not or will not be. And you can use the either, there is then the alternation between the finite negation of liash, like erla ida don't come tomorrow, tishte omli, I will not be here, tishte uke liam, I will not be here. So it's literally it is, there is not, I will be. Both are possible in like reference to the future or the past, as we have looked at this before, but roughly speaking, you can say that if you use uke plus liash, you're meaning more the transform, like that something that currently exists will not exist in the future. Like sar uke liash, there will be no more war in the future. But if I say sar ok li, there will be no war, means that it's peace times, and I believe that there will not be a war. Yeah, and here are some, just a few collocations that are good to know because they're fairly frequently used. Ukeliash, like to be absent, ukelisha, not being there, absent, ukeli met godem, in your absence, but it could also be ukeli mem godem, when I am no longer here after my death, for example. Like achana ukeli meke, once our father was no more after his death. Yeah. So the text in this chapter pertains to the Maori traditional religion. And also in the exercises, we have a little news clip pertaining to Maori traditional religion. With that all being said, see you in chapter 38.